This happened during my childhood in Matamoros, Tamaulipas. I lived with my family in a quiet neighborhood where everything went smoothly. I had a happy childhood. Due to the economic situation in the 1970s, many people were forced to migrate to other parts of the country or even to the United States in search of opportunities. For this reason, many houses were abandoned during the moves. It was common for our former neighbors to leave forgotten things behind. So much was the migration in the area that for both my friends and I, one of our favorite games was urban exploration. We would go into the vacant houses with the desire to search through the garbage to see what kind of objects had been left behind. Of course, our main objective was toys. As we explored the adjoining houses, we had to expand to the point that we already had to ride a bicycle to find more abandoned houses. On one occasion, I don't remember the date, we were not 5 blocks from our houses when we saw an uninhabited house that already had the for rent sign, and several large bags with forgotten objects had been left in the garage. We started to rummage through the bags, but among some crap, one of my friends found the head of a doll, one of those that open and close the eyes. The head was that of a baby. It had no hair and had a happy expression, but when you were staring at it, you felt this inexplicable discomfort. It was very striking, as if someone wanted to tear it to pieces with an ice pick. Between jokes and games, we decided to take it with us, and we put it on a tree that was at the entrance of some soccer fields we used to go to. Since that day, we felt a very ugly vibe, in addition to being able to feel a heavy glance and stare. But not everything ends here, because for some strange reason, we were very attracted to it, so much that we even quarreled. I fought with my friend because I wanted to take it to my house and not leave it there. But the greed had not only erupted in me but in all of my friends, each of us wanting to take it. Such was the extent of our disputes that there were days when we didn't speak. I felt a certain responsibility, since I was the one who had started everything. So after reconsidering, I went to look for my friends to apologize to them, and everything returned to normal. On one occasion, we were playing marbles, and Mario, my best friend, exclaimed, scared, "The little head rolled its eyes." But since we already knew that it could open and close them, we did not give it importance. But Mario insisted again. Then we saw that the toy did not just open and close its eyes, but moved them from side to side and even blinked. Of course, we ran away in terror, and we never stepped onto that soccer field again. After a few days, we got together again and decided what we were going to do with that thing. We had to get rid of it, but nobody had the courage to touch it. So we decided to go with an adult friend. 2 streets from where we lived, there was the house of a man named Valentin. He was very kind and used to play soccer with us. We knew his children, who were younger than us, because we had been invited to his birthday parties previously. We went to look for him. We knew at what time we could find him, and we told him everything. Obviously, he did not believe us. We took him to the soccer field to show him the head. He took it, carefree, and watched it closely for a few minutes. Then he said, "I'm taking it home. My daughter has some of her headless dolls. It will help me fix one." So, he took the head, put it in a grocery bag, and took it home. Days passed without incident, and the tranquility returned in our circle of friends. In fact, we decided it might be safe to return to the soccer field. However, 15 days had passed since we last saw Valentin, and we had never heard from him since. So, we went to go look for him at his house. We got to his house, and we were playing for half an hour, but nobody opened it. We could hear that the TV was on, and we could see lights on inside the house. Even his truck was parked in the garage, but he would not come out to greet us. This seemed very strange to us. The subsequent days that we went to look for him, the same thing happened, and we still did not hear from Valentin or his family. We discussed the situation with our parents and neighbors, but they didn't care. In fact, my mother told me that perhaps they had to emigrate like all the others. Concerned about this situation, and without help from the adults, we decided to investigate on our own. We jumped over the fence and went inside his house. When we entered, we found the lights on in some rooms. The television was also on, and in fact, the dinner plates were still on the table and the food was still there. It honestly seemed as if all the family had just vanished, since all their belongings were there. Their clothes, children's toys, even his wallet was up on the television next to his car keys. We left everything as it was and left the house with great fear, sensing that something bad had happened to them. We tried to see how to file a disappearance complaint with the police, but this was impossible since we were minors, and when we were finally able to convince our parents to support us, the complaint could not be taken since we weren't related to them. Thus the days became weeks, months, and we didn't stop searching. On one occasion, I was returning from school. I saw that there were people in Valentine's house. Thinking it was him, my heart filled with joy, and I ran to meet him. But when I reached the threshold of the door, I saw that they were different people. These people were family members who came after not hearing from them. The man said that he was Valentine's brother-in-law. After introducing myself to him, he asked me questions to find out if I knew anything about Valentine's whereabouts. I replied no. I accompanied him to ask the neighbors if they knew anything, and finally a neighbor could give a reason. An old woman who lived in the house across the street told Valentine's brother-in-law that a few months ago, after 9 o'clock at night, she heard a piercing scream that woke her up, and as the window of her room faces the street, she leaned out to see what had happened, but didn't see anything strange. Minutes later, she saw that Valentine rushed out and started the truck. Immediately after, he ran back to the house, and after that, she didn't know. The woman said that the car's engine was on all night, and around 1 in the morning, she heard the engine turn off. When the lady went out to carry out her daily activities in the morning, she saw the truck was still there. And when she heard the television on, she thought everything was fine. But ever since then, she's never heard from Valentine or his family. With the passage of time, Valentine's house also became an uninhabited house. For respect, we never went back in. However, other people did. First, the truck disappeared. Then the appliances. Furniture was stolen, until it was completely empty. Over the years, the property was auctioned off, and new tenants came to live. My friends and I grew up, and each one made his own life. But to this day, I've never stopped wondering what happened to Valentine and his family, and if that doll's head had something to do with their disappearance. I'll start by saying that I did not personally witness or experience this, but the story comes from a close family friend whom I consider reputable and honest. Personally, I'm rather skeptical when it comes to most paranormal activity, but I believe this story because of the man who told it. So as a little bit of background, my father was a police officer for 25 years through the 80s and 90s. His best friends were mostly officers growing up. I always met and was around cops. Some of my father's cop friends were annoying and rude, and some were really squared away nice guys. One in particular was my favorite. I won't use his real name, so I'll just refer to him as Bob. Bob was one of my father's closest friends and beat partner for a long time. He was an older African-American man from New Orleans. He was polite, had great mannerisms, and carried himself confidently. My father used to say he was the most honest cop he ever worked with, and had solid integrity and bravery. One night, he and my father worked an off-duty job at a local event, some sort of carnival or fair, I can't remember exactly, but there was a clown there. My father told me the entire night Bob was acting strangely. acting uncomfortable, quiet, and shy. When my father asked him what was wrong, Bob just said, "I hate clowns. I always have." My father started poking fun at him for being scared of the clown, and he said that Bob just stared at him with this look that he'd never seen him have before, like he was genuinely afraid. So my father asks why, and this is Bob's story. Bob grew up in New Orleans. When he was a child, his mom took him to stay at his aunt's house for a few weeks. Bob said that he didn't care much for his aunt. She wasn't mean to him, but he always got a strange vibe when he was around her, as though she carried an evil aura with her. His family used to joke that his aunt was involved in voodoo and black magic, but they mostly just said these things in jest. His time at his aunt's was largely uneventful, with the exception of a strange rule she had. He was not allowed into the kitchen. Bob didn't understand why, but he followed it. On some nights, Bob claimed to hear his aunt talking to people in the kitchen at odd hours. In the mornings, he would question his aunt if she had friends over, and she would say that she didn't. His aunt had a thing for dolls. She had them all around the house. He hated them. He said whenever he passed by the cabinets displaying them, he always felt like he was being watched. But she had one doll that she always carried around and protected like it was some kind of treasure. You guessed it, a clown doll. He said his aunt loved this thing, always took it around the house, caring for it like it was a child. He didn't understand why. He said it was ugly and horrible looking and was the most frightening one that she owned. One night he said that he smelled his aunt baking something sweet and conversing with someone. He got excited and ran into the kitchen without thinking about his aunt's single rule. When he ran in, he saw on the counter the clown doll, moving its mouth and speaking to his aunt in a man's voice. The clown turned its head and looked at Bob. His aunt turned around frantically and scolded him out of the kitchen. He said that as his aunt rushed him out of the kitchen, he heard the clown doll laughing. After that night, he never left his room and barely slept. His aunt claimed that he was imagining seeing the clown talk. He never went back after the incident. My father, who's a big-time paranormal skeptic, believes Bob. He said that he had never seen Bob's eyes or body language display so much discomfort and fear as he did when he was telling that story and when he looked at the clowns. He looked my dad square in the eyes and said, "I know what I saw, and I know how it sounds, but I'm telling you that it happened. That doll was alive." I've always had a life filled with paranormal events, or so my religious mother tells me. Much of those I don't remember personally, but I don't doubt her. That and, well, the stories she tells me aren't evil paranormal, just casualties, and me seeing my grandpa and uncle around when they had long been dead. But it was a nice encounter, according to her. The only thing I personally remember, and I still have the image of it stamped into my memory, is this. So, to this day, I have full baskets of plushies, dolls, and signature action figures from way back when my younger brother and I were obsessed with collecting and playing with them. I also used to have a gray dog. I don't remember the breed, but he was around the house a lot, and his name was Hobbs. Our goal was to have our cast of characters. Funny enough, we made up our characters and completely dismissed the physical appearance of the toy, often referring to dinosaurs as Sonic characters, for example. The room was always messy, because we would spend literal hours just moving the toys around and doing voices for them. We moved all around the room in doing so, and time flew by. we never cleaned our room that same day. One day after a play session, we were told to clean up after the mess we had done the other day, and so we did. I crouched to see below the bed, and midway through, something moved. I swear on my life, I saw this thing sliver around, like if it was my dog, Hobbs, crawling out from under the bed. Instinctively, I greeted him and waited for him to come out, as he normally would. But he didn't. I quickly ducked further to see what was going on, and I found that what had moved was a plushie toy. I couldn't speak for a moment, and I just glared at my brother across the room, hoping that he had somehow seen it. He heard me say the name of our dog and was equally surprised that the dog was in the room, as we would often close the door. Being the older brother, I didn't want to scream and run out of the room in horror, because I knew that that would really set the alarm off for my brother. He was really sensitive to the paranormal, and he never coped with it well. So I just told him to get out with me, and we played some Wii afterward. I didn't pick up this gray plush until the night time. This is a little bit blurry though. I think he may have picked it up because I don't remember confronting what I saw myself. I still vividly remember how it moved, simply slithering forward by thumbing itself side to side, just like a dog would. It was the villain from the first Kung Fu Panda movie, so his back, the side I saw, was spotted and gray and looked exactly like my dog's paws. I swear he moved, and I even went to confess it to my brother once we were way, way older, past the point of minding that we no longer had an option for a plushie to play with. He believes me, but simply because I'm honest. I feel that he doesn't really measure what I saw. Remember how I talked about my mother speaking to me about how I saw dead relatives? It turns out that she had a brother that died at age 2 due to heart complications. She told me this many years after we had stopped playing with dolls. To keep it simple, what happened was that another mess was made in my room. But my mother wanted me to pick up things as fast as possible because guests were coming, and for some reason they wanted to come and check me in my room. At this time I was 2 years old, so my brother hadn't been born yet. It was just me playing. She said that I did so she left the room, and when she came back, she saw me with a much worse mess than before. She got mad and asked why on earth I would just undo what I'd been doing for an hour. I had told her that Uncle Raphael had arrived to play with me. That same uncle that died at the age that I was, that my mother hadn't even mentioned to me yet. She still hasn't come up with an idea of how I could just know his name out of thin air. So she truly believes that I saw a kind, gentle infant spirit who knew who I was and just wanted to play. The phrasing of it kind of scares the crap out of me now, especially after I connected it with the events of that plushie moving. I do feel like it was probably him again, because it was the last time I ever saw my toys moving. Nothing ever came of it, because, like I said, he was a kind ghost. I didn't have nightmares or troubles picking up plushies or playing with them or sleeping in the same room where it was. The plushie is still lying around, somewhere in my brother's room, in his closet. But he's never told me or my mom about having any trouble sleeping in there. Had it been a malicious spirit, I think things would have been different. I'm pretty sure that this was just my uncle. And each day that passes, I wonder if he's really still with us, being more cautious now that I can spot and react accordingly to the paranormal. My daughter has a toy doll. You squeeze its stomach and it giggles or says something like "Mama" or "Papa." Well, it used to anyway. She's been bringing it into the pool, the bath, her water table, etc. The electronic box inside stopped working about 2 weeks ago. Until the other night. The doll was laying on the bedroom floor, most definitely not being squeezed, and it made one of its voice box noises. It did several times that night. The first time it did, I shot right up and asked my husband where the doll was, if it was under the blankets and maybe I'd rolled on it. But it wasn't. It was on the floor, not being touched. After giving myself a talk off the ledge, I fell asleep. It did the same thing a couple of more times. We laughed about it in the morning, and my husband said that maybe it just dried out and started working again. So I grabbed it and squeezed it to see if that was the case. Nope. No matter how I squeezed, the voice box inside wouldn't make a peep. I don't really know what's going on with that doll, but I have no explanation for how the voice box started working without being touched when it's dead. Recently, I've been reading some other stories, and I was reminded of something that happened to me a while ago. Once a year, my parents go on vacation together somewhere in the United States, usually to the Bahamas or to Florida. They leave me in charge of the house with my dog, and they like for me to check in on my Nana, who lives in our basement. Normal, right? There's another important bit of background information. My dad takes part in this weird golfing competition with his friends, where if somebody wins a certain amount of holes, they get to take home this creepy doll as a sort of trophy. I don't know why, but I'm guessing it's some running gag. Well, my dad won the competition, and he brought it home before he left. I'm not at all scared of dolls. In fact, before he left, I slept with it beside me as a joke. It was basically an old baby doll with a missing eye and a brown dress. I don't know the origin of it, and I didn't really bother to ask. November rolls around, and my parents leave for their vacation. Everything goes normal for a little while, but then things start to get really weird. Because I'm the stereotypical little brother, I put the doll on my sister's bed, who's in university, and I took a picture to send it to her as a joke. She hates dolls. So I leave the room with the doll still in there and head into my room just to send the photo and move on with my life. A few minutes later, I hear a massive bang. I jump, startled, and I go to look into the hallway. The door to my sister's room has slammed shut. Now, our hallway has no opening windows, and there wasn't any kind of draft. Even if there had been, that bang sounded forceful. A little on edge, I open her door, and I see that the doll has fallen, face forward, even though I left it sitting upright and slightly back. I thought it was weird, but I brought the doll back into my room and moved on. That night, I'm sleeping normally in my parents' room. I have to sleep in there while my parents are away, because I have to keep an eye on the dog, and she refuses to sleep anywhere else. I wake up suddenly in the night, which is odd for me. I usually sleep all the way through the night. I check the time, and I see that it's around 3 a.m. This immediately freaks me out, because I read that this is the witching hour, as it were. I glanced over at my dog, and she's awake too, with her head up. Also strange. I put on my little puppy voice and ask the dog if she needs to pee, but she just stares back at me and then looks to the closet. I look to the closet too, and I see that it's open, even though I very much remember shutting it before going to bed. I quickly turn on the lamp and get out of bed to close the door. I don't even bother looking inside. My teenage brain still thinks it's a ghost, and that that's far more likely than an intruder. So I get back in bed, scroll on my phone a little bit, and finally fall back asleep. I wake up the next morning as usual to feed my dog, but when I go into the hallway, I see that my bedroom door is open. I always close my door when I'm not in my room. Now it's still dark out, because I have to feed my dog at around 6 a.m. or she throws a fit. I look inside my room, turn on the light, and that doll is on the floor. I left it on my bed. I remembered the last night, and now I'm feeling paranoid, but again, I just put the doll back on my bed and left, deciding to just have my door open. After feeding my dog, I went back to sleep an extra couple of hours. And that's when the most frightening thing happened. I was woken up by a loud banging sound. Loud enough to wake me, the heaviest sleeper in my family. I quickly got up and ran downstairs, my first thought being that maybe my Nana had fallen in the basement and was banging for me to help her. But when I got downstairs, I realized the banging was coming from the balcony door. I saw the glass shaking as if something was hitting it from outside. The banging was so loud that it was shaking the counters. The strangest part is that my dog was just standing in front of the door, staring at it. And she's the type of dog who will start barking if a mouse farts. I'm really shaken up at this point. It's completely still outside. No wind at all. I text my parents and tell them what's going on, and as soon as I do, the banging stops. They tell me it's probably nothing and not to worry about it. I went downstairs to see my Nana, but she had no idea what I was talking about. Then again, she's almost completely deaf, so it didn't surprise me that she couldn't hear it. She can't even walk up the stairs, so there's no way that she was causing any of this. That was the last weird incident that happened. The next week, my parents got back. I didn't tell them everything that happened, because I didn't want them to think I was a chicken or something. Needless to say, I moved the doll out of my room until my dad brought it back to his golf team. Nothing strange happened after that. I still have no idea what went on during those couple of days, but it certainly was strange. I sort of wonder what the story behind that doll is now, but I don't think I really want to know. So it's 6 a.m. right now. I couldn't really sleep after this. I first woke up at midnight, raised my head a bit, looked toward the door, and then realized that what had woken me was the really creepy voice of someone singing. Just by the sound of it, I could definitely tell that it was a doll and not a human. I was so tired that I didn't really realize what had just happened. The TV was on in the other rooms, so in my head I thought it might have been coming from that. In my really tired state, I just told myself, hell, if I had to own a doll, I'd shit myself right now, and went back to sleep. Then at 2 a.m., I heard the same creepy singing. This time, the TV was off. Honestly, the more awake I was getting, the more I was questioning what was actually going on. I realized that I wasn't imagining it. So I've been sat here for 4 hours now, thinking about how fucking real this is. I even Googled it in the hope that it happened to someone else before. I'm so creeped out. Just thinking about that moment. I know that it was there, just in the other room. I feel like I even know what this doll looks like, even though I don't have dolls, and I've never seen it. I have no idea what's going on. When I was younger, my church took a bunch of us kids to Toys R Us. They gave us a budget, and we could buy whatever we wanted for Christmas. When we went, we all ran around with our parents and chose the toys that we wanted. I got a Barbie set with clothes and a car. I also got a Polly Pocket closet and a few of the dolls. I got a few board games also, and finally they said we had 5 minutes left. I was near the actual dolls, so I rushed, looking for one that had brown hair, like mine. I finally found one with just 2 minutes to spare. She had brown hair and bangs, and her hair was half up. She had on a pink shirt, a denim jacket with the same color jeans, and she had a little pink phone in her hand with painted buttons. There was also a button in the palm of her other hand that allowed her to talk, but there was no feature for her to move. It was just a basic doll. That was it. I reached for it and grabbed it, but my sister was also getting toys. She liked it too, so we fought for it. Our mom told us to share it, since it was the last one left, and we agreed. When we got home, we wrapped everything but the doll so we could open it and start playing. My sister and I ripped the box open and we played with the doll all day. When it was bedtime, we put her up on our bookshelf and went to sleep. I remember what happened because I woke up pretty late and automatically looked up at my bookshelf. The doll turned its head to look at me and moved its arm. I couldn't sleep all night watching it, so the next day I told my sister about it. She laughed at me. Nighttime came around again, and the doll had moved again. It moved its arms and head and was not on the bookshelf. My sister freaked out and couldn't sleep, and I freaked out and hid under the covers. The next morning we told our stepdad, and he laughed. He said, "Oh, watch out, it's a Chucky situation." We brought the doll to him and told him to look at it. He jokingly started moving its arms and legs and then gave it back to us. We took it, and as soon as we did, it moved, so we threw it off the balcony. He went back down to get it, but then the doll moved in his arms, and he threw it over the balcony too. I have no idea what was going on with that doll, but we never picked it up again. I know the doll moved on its own, but it was brand new and had never been owned by anyone else at all. I don't know how it could have been haunted. To this day, I have no idea why that happened. When I was younger, about 5 years old, I had a baby doll. It was one of those weird mixes of cloth and plastic with a battery-powered voice box. One day, this thing just started laughing constantly. It would not shut up. We took the batteries out, but it continued. We threw it outside and forgot about it for about a year, when we finally found it. We found it again, and the damn thing could still laugh. At that point, it had been without a battery pack and laying outside for over a year. There's no reason that it should have laughed. One day, my mom put it in the trunk of her car to try to seal it off, and a few years later, she got into a bad accident that crushed the front and back end of her car. I know this isn't a typical story, but I still wind up thinking about it from time to time, just because of how creepy it was. Also, my mom's okay. The crash happened a few years ago. Still, I always think back on that doll and wonder how the hell it was laughing without any power source. My dad died when I was 11. Every summer we went to a little town which has a porcelain doll museum. I loved going there, hanging out with my dad, and I had several dolls myself. But the one that I loved the most resembled an Indian girl with 2 braids. I kept it on a shelf that was facing my bed, pushed into the corner of it. I had it for like 3 to 4 years. I didn't touch it, not even once. I just admired it. As I mentioned, my dad died in December. Fast forward half a year later, it's June, summer holidays, and I'm laying on my bed with my laptop, chatting with my friend at midnight. Both my door and window were open, but it was quiet outside. No wind, nothing. And the doll suddenly fell to the floor. I was startled by the noise, but confused, since it didn't shatter. The shelf was nearly 2 meters high, I think. So I turned off the lights, covered myself in a blanket, and went to sleep, hoping that I could. The next morning, the doll was still on the ground, face down, and I started to think, how could it fall? It was protected from wind, even though there was none, and there was a 40-centimeter empty space in front of it. I got up, shaking, and slowly approached it. I sat on the floor and picked it up. The doll was intact, except for one thing. The left braid was cut in half. Not torn, cut. I quickly put it away, and I never touched it again, nor have I even looked at it. I still don't really know what happened. I tried to think that it was my dad to comfort myself, but as I grew older, that doesn't seem logical. Why would my dad, who loved me the most, try to hurt my favorite doll that he gave me? My memory of my early childhood is quite good. I wouldn't say that I'm sensitive to the paranormal at all. I'm just a regular old person. When I was about 4 years old, I owned a baby doll. This doll didn't look creepy or anything. The doll's entire body was made of hard plastic. The shoulder and hip joints, maybe the neck too, could bend, but none of the other joints could, such as the hands and feet, which were molded plastic shapes. The doll wore a long-sleeved white onesie that had tiny purple triangles on it. Bald head, I think. I have no idea where I got this doll, or what brand it is, or anything. Just that I lived in BC, Canada at the time. This was around 2001. My parents can't remember the doll, which I think is kind of odd. So basically the doll's hands would change. I can specifically remember my uncle placing the doll on the couch, with its arms out, and both hands completely open. Sometime after that, the hands would be in fists, or one hand would be opened and the other one would be closed. At the time, of course, I had no clue that this was weird whatsoever. I just tried to pry the plastic hands open when they were closed, swearing that they were open the last time I'd checked, but to no avail. It's physically impossible for the hands to have changed, but they did. It wasn't a fancy or expensive doll either. I don't know if this was paranormal at all, but I'm pretty damn certain of what I saw. I have no idea where that doll is now. I gave most of my toys away when I was 6, when we had to move to another country. But sometimes I look back on that and wonder, what was up with that doll?